Vive la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.
Polkadot Hub.
Polkadot Hub.
Viva la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.
Polkadot Hub.
Vive la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.
Vive la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.
Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hola a todos and welcome. En español primero, esta presentación va a ser hecha en inglés porque los speakers son de habla inglesa y tenemos muchísima gente que viene a la academia de otra lengua, in English. This presentation will be in English because the speakers and the attendees of the academy speak English.
We are here tonight together from one of the most important and iconic places in Buenos Aires, Puerto Madero, from Madero Walk, an amazing place. A few days ago, we have the first chapter, the first event, side event for the Polkadot Blockchain Academy in Buenos Aires, organized by Polkadot Hub. We have Gavin Wood and also Raul Romanuti, and with an amazing talk about treasury and governance B1 and B2. And today we have, Lori, you want to present the speakers, please?
Yes, well, today we have the honor of present Robert Habermeyer, co-founder of Polkadot, and Sean Tabrizi, Frame team lead. Yes. I think
Okay. Enjoy it.
And hosted by Hector, his Polkadot application engineer. Hector Bulgarini, he's Argentino, he's Argentine, and he's one of the most important developers in the ecosystem. Yes.
So, welcome, guys.
Welcome.
The stage is yours.
Sorry. Okay, we have Fernet, right? We have the drinks, all set? Hello, everybody. How you doing? I'm so happy to be here. First of all, with two, very important people from our ecosystem. Also, I have to say, two very good colleagues that I have the chance to work with. So, guys, we are here. I would like to ask you, how do you feel? I mean, we are talking about Polkadot, right? And the future of the network, the present and future of Polkadot. But before that, I would like to ask you, how do you feel like here in Argentina, right? A complete different environment, social economic, right, situation. So before starting into diving into the network, I would like to know your feelings and your vibes about being here.
Sure. Testing, 1, 2. Am I on? Maybe not.
Testing. Oh, okay.
It's your turn then.
Yeah, it's your turn.
Sounds like it's my turn. Yeah, it's good to be here. It's definitely it's warmer than up north, so that's the first main difference. It's really good to be here overall. Enjoying the academy. A lot of really clever people, good students. It is quite shocking to see what is happening here with inflation and all the socioeconomic issues. And hopefully crypto will be able to help with some of that, at least with good stores of value that are decentralized. But yeah, overall, it's been quite enjoyable. It's not my first time in the country. I'd say the last time was a little less hectic, and I spent a lot of time going around and exploring the city and saw many different neighborhoods, including this one. And yeah, not much more to say on that front.
Very good.
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's a blessing and a curse to be sweating in January. It's a little better than the cold, but I mean, honestly, I've just been loving it here. I mean, I think more than, I mean, the economic conditions, all kind of stuff, things that I can never really understand. I'm just kind of a traveler in the space. But what I see and what I love is the passion of the people, how kind and wonderful everyone is. The food is amazing. I mean, that's great. And it's like, I mean, at least where we're staying near the university, it's Recoleta, right? It's in that right there's like 20 parks. And I wake up in the morning, I walk to school, and everyone is working out with their dogs, hanging out. Like, I mean, you guys really come alive in the summer, right? So, I mean, I've really enjoyed it.
Well, that's very good. I'm glad that you're having a good time here.
Yeah.
So, well, now we're starting and discussing specifically about Polkadot. We have a year of almost, a little bit more than a year with live parachains in our ecosystem, right? Not in our ecosystem, in the Polkadot network. So, how do you feel like this year went for the parachains, right, and the ecosystem? If you have to make, like, I don't know, a summary about your feelings about the
Yeah, it was quite interesting. It was something that we built up to for a very long time, and there was a lot of excitement around the launch, especially early on. It didn't seem like people knew how many slots there were going to be. So like now we can see there's a large supply and auctions keep running, but for those first few auctions there was really heavily competitive. I think we've been very happy with the performance of the network, right? That Kusama and Polkadot are continuing to onboard parachains. To be honest, it's one of the few blockchains that hasn't fallen over. So given that things have continued to run and teams have continued to onboard is quite nice. We spent a lot of time getting this into shape, and the auctions have gone pretty much successfully. Now, I think what we saw happen around the middle of last year was kind of interesting, where we started to see a shift from supply or from demand to supply, right? Like a lot of the good teams that the Builders Program and other teams at Parity had kind of assembled and helped onboard onto Polkadot had already acquired slots at that point. And then I think what we saw was not nearly as much competition as teams, not quite as much new blood coming into the ecosystem.
Yeah. I mean, I think there are like positives and negatives to all the decisions made in terms of the auction system and the way they released it. In some ways, when Rob mentioned we luckily don't have any major problems. It's like teams have to make the decision. If I'm going to bid for this auction slot, I'm gonna really put my money behind myself. Really feel that my team is ready and production ready to go out there, right? We're not just making a field where anyone can just drop whatever half-baked idea is and collect some money, right? So there's kind of this competition to really say like, am I ready to go to production, right? Which is a good thing I think for the blockchain space, where often things are kind of chaotic, right? In other ways, I think it's also been great to be able to slowly ramp up the network. I mean, I'm sure as working on the pair threads and parachains protocol, it's nothing better than to be able to add one more, and see how the network responds to that thing. I imagine if we just unloaded 20 at once, there would just be a million issues that we can fix more subtly and more quietly, having kind of seen parts of the network, start to, not degrade is the word, but need performance boosts, right? And that kind of stuff is really great as an incremental increase. What I would hope, though, moving forward is that we start to open the gates even more. I think that teams are starting to realize that there is a lot of supply for block space on Polkadot. I think people are realizing that there's a lot of ideas and projects that haven't been captured by existing incumbents. And I think that I would hope that people are looking to say, hey, this is some gold rush that I can go through and actually build on this space and really claim some of that very nice secure block space on Polkadot, right?
Okay, yeah. I mean, now you are mentioning this thing about the slots, right, and the onboarding. I can think about also the role of Kusama, right? Because this is something that just came up to my mind. I mean, all the work that was done in Polkadot in such a smooth way also happened thanks to Kusama, right?
Yeah.
So also, how do you see Kusama, right, in this year, in 2022? with all the changes happening, we try to push the borders, right, for Kusama. And I think, I mean, personally, I believe that it commit, right, its purpose very well, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of Kusama, what Kusama is it's a canary network. It's a chaos network. There's not that many fundamental differences between the core technology of Kusama and the core technology of Polkadot, except in that things get rolled out to Kusama much earlier. You can test things on paper. You can test things in unit tests, or trying to integrate and try to run it locally or in a cluster and see what happens. But when these are economic protocols, you need real economic value to be at stake in order to know how they're going to function. So Kusama has always gotten things much earlier. There could be more chaos on Kusama. I think the role of Kusama, the main difference, to be honest, going forward, is in the role of the community. The technology is quite similar, but the community, I think, is very different, right?
Very much.
And it's much more cavalier, much more, I think, cutting edge, and has a real spirit to it, which is quite different from the spirit of the Polkadot community. And I hope to see that as some of the new features roll out, that the Kusama chains are willing to do, or builders on Kusama are willing to do things that maybe are a bit stupid or maybe are a bit crazy, because the barriers to entry are much lower.
Yeah. Yeah. Also, like something I saw this year is like teams moving from Kusama to Polkadot, right? And I think, like, do you think, for example, Sean, that that's a natural path, right, for a team to start only in Kusama, test their use case for, I don't know, a certain amount of time, and after that, they validate like the use case, migrate it to Polkadot?
I mean, I really think the ideal situation is that they have a footprint in both. Like, I mean, I know from experience, from our time in Parity, like how many times Kusama has saved us to keep Polkadot running well and secure.
Yeah.
Having your own canary network for your own chain, which can be on itself a canary relay chain, I think will be a huge advantage over other products which will try to maybe shortcut or save a buck by not doing that. I think that there's a lot to be gained there, and it's one of those things that's kind of unique to our ecosystem. Like, you can't easily get a canary version of your chain on a value-bearing canary network, right? Like, we provide that by default, right? And we provide that option. So I think really we should see players in both. But I do think, again, the technology will always be the same, but the culture can be different. And I think that even your application on Kusama can have a different culture around it, right? Like, again, the thing I always imagine is like Polkadot's a little bit of a suit, and Kusama is like this crazy, wild, punk rocker, right? I think a lot of Web3 applications can be thought of in those lights, and I would say, embrace both. Like, embrace both cultures and capture a wider audience that way, right?
Yeah, that's a very good answer. I like that approach as well. Something like I would like to ask you guys is, how do you see like the network in terms of use cases, right? On the use cases offering, right? And for example, how would you like to see in the midterm, right, the use case offering from the network?
Yeah, I mean, people can kind of acknowledge the broad components that go into a Web3 stack. You have stuff like settlement, you have stuff like storage, you have the ability to transfer value. A lot of these things do condense down into use case. I think one of the most clear use cases of crypto in general are things like decentralized finance or decentralized property rights. One example of that being NFTs. Now, I'm not necessarily advocating for overinflated NFT markets, but rather the fact that you can really own objects in a way that's enforced by the network security. I mean, the key thing to understand, I think, about Polkadot is that Polkadot it's a continuation of crypto use cases that were already out there, right? Like, the main thing you need to implement these use cases, in some sense, some kind of digital scarcity. And you could already get digital scarcity on Bitcoin, or you could get it on Ethereum, but the issues were all about scalability and ease of use for developers to build on top of it. And that's really what Polkadot is bringing to the table there.
Yeah, I just add, there's definitely a broad level, like, so many answers to this question, but if I had to be very specific, I think I'm hoping that Polkadot is going to be a platform that enables a lot of the applications which wouldn't exist in a fee-based world. I think if we go back to why is Ethereum basically a DeFi chain, right? It's basically the only main things that you can really do is DeFi. It's because when you're working in a system where you have to pay fees and outcompete other people with fees to use the space available on Ethereum, you basically are saying that, okay, well, I'm going to pay $100 for a fee. It better make me $1,000 or more, right? That kind of stuff. I think Polkadot, it's one of the really interesting and kind of underappreciated things is that it has this auction-based model where we allocate for you space ahead of time. And technically speaking, we don't really charge any fees. We just borrow some token from you, and we can give it back to you at the end. So being able to create an application, know for the next 2 years how much it's going to cost you, which is really nothing, right? And be able to use that block space in however you want. For example, to create identity applications, voting applications, maybe nonprofit, eco applications. These are the kinds of things which just don't financially make sense on a fee-based system. So I hope to see, a shift from Web3 is DeFi to actually the things that we promised when trying to build these applications, this platform to begin with, right?
Yeah, basically.
It's an interesting thing, right? Like, and this is something that we try to roll up into the concept of block space in general, right? Like that many systems are kind of reactive to what users throw at them, right? A user makes a transaction, user has to pay a fee, something happens as a result of that. But when you can introduce more layers of abstraction and kind of generalize these mechanisms, you have the ability for applications to cover their users' fees. Or is it even the case that every blockchain needs to have a token, right? Like you can have economically sustainable ventures that don't provide their own token. We try to make stuff like that easy to do within Substrate and within Polkadot.
For sure.
I mean, now you have mentioned it. Also, Sean mentioned it before. You said the word block space, right? Would you like to explain a little bit? You make like a very long article about like explaining, right? I mean, it took us like a couple of days to process it. A very, very nice and enjoyable, read. But can you like describe a little bit like block space for the people like maybe never heard the
Yeah, sure.
the term?
Yeah, absolutely. Block space it's a way of looking at what blockchains actually produce. Like you have all these computers coordinating over the internet and producing something. Well, what is that thing? How do you think about that as a product? How do you think about it as a class of different kinds of products? What is it manufacturing? It's a way of, it's sort of an abstraction or a generalization that lets us easily understand the differences between what different blockchains are producing. So what that product is I define it as the ability of a blockchain to execute and finalize operations. So that's a very general definition. But I think it's quite important to look at this generalization because, one, with block space, you can reason a bit better about the supply and demand of the market, right? Like, what kind of block space do people need? What properties do they need of it? How do you maximize for those properties? How do you focus on efficient allocation of block space? How do you focus on making sure that block space is getting into the hands of people who need it most, rather than allocating it to people who don't, or use cases that don't need it as much? So it's kind of a general thing, but it helps us really understand the market mechanisms, right? And making sure that as Web3 systems scale to 8 billion people, that we have block space available to all of them as they need it.
Yeah, maybe to make something a little bit like relatable without using the word block space. I think people could understand if they look in the space as a whole. There's a lot of blockchains out there, and a lot of them are not being used. We call these like a lot of ghost chains, right? And I think the idea you might have in your head is like, well, do we really need all these blockchains when no one's using any of them? That it feels wrong. There's something about like the imbalance of usage here is not right. I think this is kind of illustrating that there's a lot of this space available, but it's not maybe of high quality. It's not being efficiently allocated and economically backed in correct ways. I think when we frame our mindset about trying to see like, okay, how many applications out there do we actually are actually needed to kind of power the visions we have right now, and how do we scale that? When we think about things in terms of this thing called block space, like this unused land or availability, then we can actually really frame like, okay, well, what is the useful things we need to be building? What are the kinds of protocols or ideas we need to optimize for to be able to create high quality, useful, scalable block space, right?
Yeah, I think that's pretty accurate. And to go a bit more concrete, I mean, imagine if you're doing something like start a restaurant or starting a store, right? And the first thing you do, the first day you open your store, you only have a few things to sell, but immediately you rent out something the size of a department store, right?
Yeah.
And you have all this empty space, but you only have a few customers. And this is clearly an inefficient allocation of your resources. And this is kind of what's happening on ghost chains as well. You have a lot of application chains. Application-specific blockchains is one of the things that's happening. It's kind of a trend within the ecosystem. But for people who are bootstrapping their chain, they're kind of paying for all of these empty blocks. They're minting their tokens, they're paying these tokens to their validators in exchange for empty blocks. And this is not really a good thing for people who are trying to bootstrap a product or application. It doesn't make economic sense. So a lot of what we say with efficient allocation is try to create mechanisms where when you're building a protocol that nobody is getting paid for doing nothing, right? That it's resource efficient and lets people spin up their protocol more efficiently.
Awesome.
Okay, good. Basically, this is a little advanced question, okay? So I will try to do it the best as I can. So Polkadot is a multi-sharded system, right? Meaning like executions are not happening in one place. If we compare it with Ethereum, for example, we have a single place of a single thread execution, or a single place where all the executions are happening. So that basically allows you to do something like flash loans, right?
Okay.
Okay. The question is like in Polkadot, we have like these multi-sharded systems, and something like a flash loan is not possible, right? Because we have a complete different architecture. So based on this, do you think like developers should build a new mental model around this new, it's not a new concept, but it's like a different architecture where developers have to basically deal with, and they have to manage like, different scenarios. Like, for example, asynchronicity,
asynchronicity, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you very much. And those kind of different scenarios that basically are not happening on a single execution thread like Ethereum.
Yeah. Just really quick, I would say, like, if we just compare it to previous technologies, like let's look at the CPU of a computer, right?
Yeah.
At some point, it was just like one core getting faster and faster to the point where it was like, it just was like big and overheating, whatever, right? And if we look at today, we have computers with many cores, actually much weaker on a per core basis than the cores we had in the past, but much more performant to what the needs of your computer are, right? Your computer doesn't need one super core. It actually needs to run multiple tasks, all of which are kind of smaller, and are distributing and offloading their needs to this multi-core CPU. I think this is a great parallel for what we expect of blockchains. Like, it's not about running one super process as fast as you can. It's about having many different parallel tasks run, many different application, what we would call like application chains running, and a platform which supports all of them happening in parallel, right? Now, of course, it does increase complexity when you try to do interactions between stuff, but this is a problem we've already solved too. I mean, async programming is something that is saying new to this space is probably not correct, but it's a thing that people are still like learning and adopting, even in Rust, even in JavaScript, even in other languages. This is the kind of thing where people need to change their mental model. And just because something isn't doable in an asynchronous model does not mean that that model is bad. It just means you need to shift the frame of how you think about things, right?
Yeah, I think that's really well put. And it is indeed the trend within blockchain scaling, right? You have a few different approaches. There's something called the scalability trilemma, where you basically trade off decentralization, security, and performance, right? And some people will say, well, we actually don't need to split everything into multiple blockchains, but in a way they're sacrificing on decentralization when they do that, and that has its own costs. We believe that decentralization is quite important and try to maintain it for the system, but this is also what's going to happen in the Ethereum space. It's also what's happening in the Cosmos world. I think as a general rule within the blockchain space, people are slowly acknowledging the need to shift from synchronous work to asynchronous coordination. And the model of a CPU in a computer is also, I think, a very good metaphor, because if you have a CPU with a certain number of cores, right? Like you might have a laptop with 8 or 16 cores, right? Something, the new Apple ones might have 16 or 32 cores. But your computer is actually able to do hundreds or thousands of different tasks, and it has a scheduler that kind of maps them onto the execution resources. And this is really how we think about our architecture as well, is that,
if you have 8 cores or 16 cores, that doesn't mean you can only run 8 or 16 programs at the same time. You're kind of constantly swapping them in and out and doing work that way. So it's a very efficient way to schedule tasks.
Yeah. And I'll say that this is the wrong place to think about compromises. Like just because something is more difficult doesn't mean we should avoid those solutions. In fact, we should be again optimizing for what we're trying to build in the space, which is like unstoppable decentralized applications, and realize we need to use the best tools for it, even if those tools are harder to build.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, it's a very good point, and this brings me to, for example, XCM, right? Which is like our core components in interoperability and to make basically these sharded systems to work together, right? And I remember, like, I read a very interesting discussions in the Polkadot forum that, by the way, I think was one of the biggest achievements of last year, releasing the Polkadot forum. I very invite you to go there, read and participate, right? But there was like a very nice, interesting discussion about the positioning of XCM around like all this, right? First of all, for maybe the people that don't know XCM, it would be nice if you can like explain a little bit what is XCM, okay? And also, I think that it would be nice to connect like the previous question with about how XCM basically supports all these multi-sharded systems.
Sure. So XCM stands for cross-consensus messaging, not cross-chain, which I think is the misconception, but cross-consensus. And I think the easiest analogy I could give is, imagine that Polkadot provides to you a telephone, and you can call anyone in the world, but you need to pick a language to talk to, or you're not going to be able to understand each other. XCM is basically trying to define a common language that you can pick up the phone, talk to anyone in the world, and they will understand what you're trying to say. Now, instead of you, it's a blockchain or another consensus system, like a smart contract or some other kind of consensus-based system. And the idea is that, if we can define a common language of like common operations and things we want to do, it will greatly simplify and increase the chances of interoperability between those layers. Things like within the blockchain space, whether you're a smart contractor or a blockchain or anything in between, things like balance transfers are a common operation. It makes sense for us to have a definition for what that might look like, no matter what you are. And that would mean, if everyone programs that with that language or uses that language, that you can immediately have native integration between these different consensus systems without having to program extra things on top. And in a world where we believe there'll be many chains, many, many more contracts, many more like interesting systems, the more we can standardize those kinds of like, first-class behaviors, the more easily we'll be able to adopt and use those things as well.
Yeah, the common language is quite important. In particular, I think it's important to stress the fact that a lot of cross-chain solutions focus on just transmitting value. XCM is focused on transmitting data or even executing, to some sense, arbitrary code. Like, to be honest, the way that I like to think about XCM is almost as smart contracts that are sent between chains. So you can imagine that there's spaces between the blockchains, and you actually have programs that kind of move between them and live there, and they represent actions that are going to be taken across many different chains. So instead of having applications that live on one chain and that application talks to applications that live on others, XCM kind of allows applications to spread out between many different chains by doing so.
Oh, yeah, that's super. I mean, I'm so excited about, I'm a software developer, right? And when I first heard about XCM and well, first I heard about the parachains and this thing that you can build your own blockchain, right? I got so excited about it. And I would say that the last 6 months, right, I basically spent trying to, get more and more into XCM because I think it's one of the, the best tools, right, we have developed as a community, right? And based on this, I would like to ask you, how do you envision the blockchain development in the midterm, right? I mean, this is a very open question, no specific. How do you see blockchain developers should do their work in, I don't know, 5 years?
Yeah, I think there's a thing we have in our documentation, which is the sliding scale of ease of development and maximum flexibility.
Okay.
Usually, if you have a product which is maximally flexible, it's complex because you have to make a lot of decisions. You have to make decisions at every point of where things can flex, right? But then there's also this other scale where we make a lot of decisions for you, and that's the ease of development. I think that within Parity and Substrate, we focus a lot on flexibility. And I want to be clear, I think we've used every piece of flexibility so far. I mean, Parity as an engineering company has not only launched a relay chain, but launched different levels of system chains, different level of substrate-based products. Like, we've tinkered with every possible flexibility we can. But I think what I hope we would have in the near future is a better focus on building out that ease of development, where we make a bunch of assumptions for you, and you can then even better focus on the product you want to build. And I think we're already one step further with this with Substrate. I mean, you don't have to decide the networking layer and the database layer, a lot of stuff, but you still have to make a lot of decisions within your state transition function. I think that we can do even better to make that simpler and make it almost as easy as developing a smart contract and launching a blockchain behind that.
Yeah. To take it in a somewhat different direction, I think that to be honest, there's far too much focus on people building blockchains. It's definitely not the only way to build in a blockchain application. I mean, anybody who's developed Web 2 applications might be familiar with things like AWS or Firebase or things like that. And it's exposed as just a bunch of different services. You have services like Lambda, you have services for authentication, things like that. And you just kind of go and stitch them together, their APIs, and then you have an application, right? Because what people really want to build, for the most part, are products.
Yeah.
And the people who should be building chains, maybe once you get a product to a particular level of size, you're like, okay, now I need a blockchain. Now I need my own blockchain because I really need to specialize it. But there should also be many general pieces of infrastructure that are quite simple to stitch together. So I would really hope that in 5 years, somebody who's looking to develop something in a blockchain ecosystem doesn't have to think about any of these details, that there are just services, infrastructure chains, and other things that they can rely upon in a simple way.
Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. And this basically brings me to the next question about like smart contracts in our ecosystem. Do you think like using or relying on smart contracts is like a way to basically do what you are saying, like this of building a product? Do you think like the technology of the smart contracts in our ecosystems is like in a way making like the life easier to developers to bring their use case?
I think we're just getting started in that space. Like, to be honest, like, the priority has always been to launch Polkadot, which means we have to build a bunch of tools around blockchains. But I think we're just at the beginning of contracts being live on some parachains, Ink being a pretty stable language, which is pretty fun to use, and people built and realizing that, hey, actually, my product doesn't need a whole blockchain, at least not yet, right? Yeah. I think that what I would want to see in the contract world is a lot of people building and testing on it, proving that WASM is a good platform for smart contracts, right? And that Rust can lead to much better programs than things like Solidity.
Yeah, agree.
But beyond that, also, making sure in our ecosystem that we provide easy pathways for people to transition from a contract, which, again, it does have its limitations, to potentially becoming things like a blockchain when they've proven that they need it, right? And it shouldn't be the default that I need a whole blockchain. This is just going to create unused block space, right? We need to be able to take advantage of other existing block space, but if you need it, be able to scale up in the way you want, right? And so that's really what's a key part, I think, that we should focus on in the contract future.
Absolutely. It's the path for builders, that there should be places where there are very low barriers to entry, but also space for them to expand and specialize. This is how it works in any area of business. If you're starting trying to make some kind of chip, you're not going to build your own fabrication for it. You're going to use some existing service for it. Maybe later on, then you need to create your own fabrication factory. But it's exactly this path for users, and I think there are some really nice maybe glimpses of the future that we can get from the fact that Ink is using WebAssembly, and from the fact that Polkadot is actually quite general over the types of programs that it considers blockchains. I mean, one kind of fun fact is that Polkadot doesn't actually require that parachains are blockchains. It just requires that they are what we call state transition machines. That might be useful in the future, but even just giving the fact that you might have the ability to write a smart contract and just press a button, and bam, that smart contract and its state gets copied over, becomes a chain, and now it's running as a chain, and that's like the path to scaling a product.
All right. Going specifically about the let's say Polkadot protocol, right? Can you describes what like next steps are coming into like the protocol itself, like I don't know, the parachain protocols. So for the ones like would like to know more about like the specs of the network, right? What can we expect happening this year that will, I don't know, boost the performance or like, you know, increase the number of parachains?
Sure.
What can the users expect?
Yeah, there are a couple key things. So coming again from the lens of block space, there are basically two things we want to do. One is increase the amount of block space that the network produces, and the other is add tools for better efficient allocation of that block space. So to cover the first, we are building, for over a year now, a set of optimizations to the network known as asynchronous backing. To be honest, the details of it are not particularly important. In fact, it's something that sort of the specification of the network has always supported, but it's been quite a large engineering task. So that will be coming out this year. Don't have concrete numbers yet, but we are expecting quite significant throughput and slot improvements, number of parachains as well as throughput of parachains as a result of it. What we can base estimates on are the fact that instead of making blocks every 12 seconds, parachains will be able to make blocks every 6 seconds. And per block, instead of having half a second of execution time, they'll be able to do about 2.5 or 3 seconds of execution time. So you can do a little multiplication and see exactly how much faster we might expect that to get. Yeah, really excited about this. This has been a long time coming, and I think it's going to be really cool. And on the other side, then, okay, Polkadot is making more block space available. The next thing is make it easier to allocate. So one of the things we're calling exotic scheduling, it's essentially saying, hey, slots and governance are not the only way to schedule parachains. There should be many ways. And we want to add some generalization into the Polkadot chain to support more kinds of mechanisms. The first of those mechanisms is known as parathreads, where essentially pay-as-you-go parachains, right? When you need to make a block, you can get block space, and the blockchain will advance. And there are a lot of really cool things you can build on top of this that will make it very easy for people to get started in the ecosystem.
Awesome. We are like, you know, making, as a community of builders, a lot of improvements to the network, the ones that you have discussed. And now also we should like focus on increasing, right, the usability of the network. Sean, I know like you have been, I don't know if it was part of your role or not, but you were like, you know, all the time trying to push like new UIs, right, like building teams in Parity that focus on like, you know,
onboarding the world.
Onboarding the world, right? Yeah. I mean, and actually, I love that. I don't know if you were the one choosing.
Gav. It's always Gav.
Okay, that was that was a good naming.
Yeah.
So, how do you think we can do to, you know, increase the usage of the network and the adoption and etc.?
Well, I think this is honestly, onboard the world in the context of Polkadot is a challenge, because the truth is that, you know, Polkadot is not a product for everyone. It's like when Polkadot is done correctly, you won't know you're using it. You will just be using the applications you use every day. They will be backed by, you know, secure block space, which is provided by Polkadot, and you as a user just won't even know that you're using it. But in terms of the space we're in today and capturing mindshare and capturing users, it is obvious that we need to focus on and try to prioritize where we can that, you know, usage of the network itself. The spaces we've seen that as the kind of the most prevalent things in my mind is 3. One I would call is welcome to Polkadot, an idea of how can I discover what I can do as a user, whether it's just learn, actually use or grow or do other kind of stuff. I just want to discover what I can do. So welcoming me to Polkadot. Second is staking. I mean, a lot of people, they look at blockchains as a way to I don't want to say the word make money, but like they want to participate by using their tokens, which they've bought, and put it back into the network to stake and to improve the security of the network.
Yeah, it's storing their value, right?
Yeah, exactly.
In this like very high inflationary.
Exactly.
Right.
And then and making the block space that's secure. I mean, they're really providing utility to the blockchain, and the blockchain is providing back a reward, right?
Yeah.
And finally, the one is governance. And I think governance is probably the most interesting, most exciting, where really, you know, the blockchain itself can like reach its arm out and change the world. I mean, one of the kind of more crazy things that we've seen on Kusama is this thing called the Society, which has somehow convinced over 150 people to get tattoos on their body. Some of them are in this room today, if you can find them, to get a tattoo on their body representing that blockchain. That's crazy, right? But imagine that kind of power used for good, like used to actually improve the lives of others, or to put a billboard somewhere, trying to improve the messaging of some need, planting trees in the world, like whatever you can imagine. Blockchains with their financial power can do that, and a lot of this financial power is backed by governance. So I think these are like kind of 3 areas where users can directly use Polkadot today, and we need to increase the usage and awareness of how to use it and simplify how users can use it. But again, I really think there is kind of an upper limit to where onboarding the world to Polkadot stops and onboarding the world to parachains begins. Yeah. And that's where we really see the application chains, that all the ideas and thoughts that you say, like, I want to do this on a blockchain, Polkadot doesn't provide that to you. Polkadot provides secure block space to the applications that will provide that to you. And so I think we'll focus on this for now, but this is where I want to see the area to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a really important point, that Polkadot is base level infrastructure, and as a regular user of electricity, you don't go around touching the wires.
Don't touch the wires.
I hope you don't.
Yeah, but still, electricity does a lot for people every day, and I think Polkadot or other Web3 infrastructure kind of can fill a similar role in people's lives. Kind of silently providing something of use to them. And to that end, I think there are many things that can be done also by the Treasury, by governance, to try to make the journey easy for applications that are building on Polkadot. Good patterns for how people should interact with the blockchain, making it easy for them to control wallets or abstract that, and good libraries and things like that. And I mean, for what it's worth, Sean has been doing amazing work with the Onboard the World team, the staking UI. This is, I think, there's a perception that Polkadot has bad UI, and I think that is to some extent deserved, but what is happening now with the staking dashboard and Onboard the World team is really, I think, ready to change that perception.
I want to clarify, I deserve no credit. There's a guy named Ross. He's been doing it by himself, and all I said was, I want this thing to exist, and he made it happen. So
yeah. Ross is awesome.
Yeah, I have to say that I'm a very huge Polkadot.js fan, supporter.
Okay, sure.
So I know, like, sometimes there are some, claims or something. I love the tool, but I can understand, like, maybe sometimes for developers, right, the usage of that tool is easier. But, well, I mean, I don't have more questions, but it would be great. I don't know if anyone has any questions, and you got the opportunity to have, like, 2 great people here. So please bring, a big round of applause. So, basically, we have time for, a couple of questions. Are you up for a couple of questions? Sorry, I dropped the...
Yeah, for sure.
I'm fine, sure. Yeah.
Yeah, cool. Anyway, we agreed before.
Hi, guys. My name is Ariel. I'm from Buenos Aires, Argentina. Nice to have you here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah.
So I'm working on a game studio, so it's very good for me to know all this power that is being unleashed on Polkadot, Kusama, and Parity, right? So it's interesting for me to have you here, and maybe, my question is, what do you think about the gaming field and the play-to-earn field? Because all this power, all these possibilities in your ecosystem. I mean, what do you guys think about it? I mean, I have some ideas, but I think that you can do it better. So thank you.
Yeah, it's an interesting field, and thank you for the question. It's so with respect to gaming, I think there are a couple of things that are really interesting, and a couple of very serious challenges that have to be surmounted. So some of the things that are really interesting, I think, is the ability to actually own in-game objects. I think, especially with some of the newer cryptographic protocols, the ability to create multiplayer games where there's no central server, but there's still unknowns out there, right? Stuff like zero knowledge. You can really do stuff like this. It's very cool. Some of the really big challenges, I think, are preventing anti-cheat. preventing cheating in games, particularly that games are actually being played by humans. If I think about what is the biggest service that a poker site provides, the biggest service that an online poker site provides is anti-cheating mechanisms, as well as limiting the amount of interactions that actually end up on chain. If you're playing an FPS like Call of Duty or something like that, then every time you shoot a bullet, is this going to make a blockchain transaction? I think that's a big challenge for the gaming space.
Yeah. Can I ask a question for you, actually? Asynchronous backing, one of the things I remember hearing is that it may also help support blockchains which want to have a less than 6-second block time. Is that correct still, or?
So that's actually another more future thing, which may still happen this year, but it's certainly going to be underway this year. We call more of elastic scaling.
Sure.
But I think it'll be able to get down to, say, 1 second or 2 second, but even this is still quite a lot of latency for gaming.
Sure. Okay. Now what I say is this. Maybe then, to be honest, Polkadot is, or like directly Polkadot is going to be a hard space for all kinds of games, because there might be situations where you want to have a high-speed throughput blockchain. And there's a lot of sacrifices you make for having lots of blocks. For example, it makes forking more common. It makes finalization maybe take longer, that kind of stuff, right? But these are things that you might be willing to sacrifice. I think what I would say is look towards Substrate. Like Substrate provides you, again, a tool to be able to build blockchains where you can customize exactly the level of block time or block space to how you want to afford it. And through the power of bridges and other kinds of ways, I think Polkadot can still provide security and at least interoperability to that chain. So yeah, it's an interesting space.
Yeah. On my side, something I can say about game development around Web3 in general is like basically if I have to come back to 2021 where all these like games happened, is like I think like we saw many failing projects due to not good token economics decisions.
Yeah.
Right. Basically, that killed most of the projects. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's a challenge. How to basically you define the good like game theories around like games.
Yeah.
So they survive and they have like basically. I mean, it's not like mandatory, right, to put money in the middle, right, as a as a requirement, but or as a motivation, let's say, or incentive. But my feeling from that time was like something needs to be like investigated there, right? Otherwise, like if you put the ground tokenomics, like the whole game could like go down.
Yeah, we are evolving that thing.
Yeah, exactly.
He said that they're evolving that thing. So yeah. Awesome.
Thank you for the question. If you got the question in Spanish, I can try translating. I don't promise I will do it great, but
muy bien.
Yeah, exactly. Don't feel limited by the English.
This is another amazing thing about Argentina. I mean, every room I've been in has been a full room.
Yeah, well,
it's like.
I mean, this is very much.
We need bigger rooms. Honestly.
I mean, guys, this is very much represents like the Latin America spirit, about our technology. This is why like we are so happy to have you here because I mean, I speak in behalf of the region. And for us, like this technology brings us, real benefits. It's not like we are early adopters for the technology only. I mean, this has a very direct impact on us. So I think that's the reason why we have so many people here,
Yep. Very good.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
Hi, everyone. My question is a Polkadot a potential bridge to some CBDC solution?
CBDC solution, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, this is kind of an interesting one. Is Polkadot a bridge to a CBDC or CBDC solution? This is something that we talked about a lot in the early days of Polkadot, and we haven't really talked about it that much lately, but sort of the capacity for enterprises to acquire chains on Polkadot. Essentially, because Polkadot is very general over what it considers a parachain or blockchain, it actually does provide the ability for enterprises. And what most enterprises want when they create a blockchain system is to have control over it, either by themselves or by a consortium. I don't think most enterprises are actually very comfortable with the idea of deploying logic into the wild on a public blockchain. So it's kind of, I think, possible for enterprises or central banks or others to create sort of enclaves that they control within the system and then have those easily communicate with other parts. And what Polkadot would guarantee in that case is that that enclave is obeying the rules of the enclave. So from a general architecture perspective, yes. I mean, in terms of central bank digital currencies, I think that's a field that's still very much being explored even by central banks.
Yeah. I guess I would only add that, I think what a lot of the CBDCs are looking for is like high quality block space, which I hope we provide. And I think that, again, knowing the fees ahead of time is, again, for any business is a really big advantage, right? Imagine trying to use a stable coin or something like that on a network where one day to the next, the fees triple, right? I think that kind of stuff can bring ease of mind to many enterprises and many other governments who might want to build technologies on top of the stack.
Yeah, certainly if it lowers the time it takes for them to deploy.
Sure.
Yep. Is there any other question in the room?
Raise your hand high.
No?
Sweet.
Okay. All right, there is one. One more. We have one from our friend here, former student of the...
This guy asks so many questions in class too. But so if you know, you know.
On his defense, I have to say they are good questions.
They're good questions.
I mean, the guy is spot on.
Great questions, absolutely.
Okay, yeah. I'm curious what the timeline is for the parathreads and what challenges have you encountered, and if you could talk a bit about that, the engineering aspect of the parathreads. Why is it not already live?
Yeah, it's actually quite a good question. So why is it not already live? One of the main reasons, essentially, is because there were certain core security features, essentially, that needed to go in first, and those have now. It's kind of unlocked things. What actually goes into deploying parathreads is a couple of different things. So one, generalization of scheduling of parachains within the relay chain runtime. Logic for people to actually create programs that bid on parathread space and making that customizable, and as well as changing a few other areas of the code for how validators or the nodes of Polkadot communicate with each other based on parathreads and not just on parachains. To be honest, the overall project of parathreads is not that deep. So in terms of a timeline, I feel quite comfortable saying this year. A lot will depend on, say, audits. As with any software estimates, there are always delays. Yeah. But I would be not surprised to see code approaching feature complete by the end of this half of the year.
But I think I would like to add, unlike sometime in the past, I think this is one of the priorities coming up, right?
Absolutely.
This is, before it was a thing that we wanted to do, but security was paramount. Now that security stuff is handled, and we're getting closer. Parathreads is, as I understand, front of you.
Yeah, that's very much true as well. The essentially the developer resources, because this is pretty deep core technology stuff. Yeah. Polkadot is a big place. Parity is a big company, but there's surprisingly a lot of developers we managed to hire in the last year or two, which have opened up the ability to ship projects like this better.
Sure. All right. So before finishing, I want to, first of all, thanks Parity for putting the academy here, right, and bringing so many, people not only from Parity, also from the parachains to, work as instructors and TAs is great. It's not. I mean, I work for Parity, and for me, it's not common to have the chance to speak, with Sean and Rob, and ask questions. So for me, it's great. I want to thank Parity for that. I want to also thank you, Polkadot Hub, right, for all the work that they are doing. They are not just organizing events, right? They are putting a lot of workload in terms of hackathons. Teaching the community. So they have been doing that for a lot of time. So thank you very much, Lorena, Hernan, and the whole team. Thank you, Sean. Thank you, Rob. It was a pleasure. And enjoy the night.
Yeah.
Thank you. Have a hand for Hector.
Yes. That's great.
We made it.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much for this presentation. I want to say thank you to all of you, all the community, for Parity, for Polkadot, for all the parachain that and the organizers that have been possible to be here and have Robert and Sean in this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Woo! Yay!
We have some present.
Sure.
Thank you.
The small is for me. Okay.
Thank you.
I know such a good developer as them, so
Okay, guys.
I deserve it.
Thanks again, and we want to take a picture of this amazing moment. Yeah,
let's do it.
You guys.
Sure. Yeah.
We have a cocktail upstairs, so enjoy it.
Let's come closer, closer.
Let's go here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's
Of
start.
course, thank you.
Yeah,
Honestly.
Thank you.
Vive la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.
Polkadot Hub.
Vive la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.
Polkadot Hub.
Vive la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.
Vive la Polkadot Blockchain Academy con Polkadot Hub.